Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to just end the week in which we finally made a big step forward on EU relations by discussing the way one of the terrors of Brexit for many years, Mark Francois, aka Penfold, has found his wings well and truly clipped now. There was a time when the chair of the ERG was someone Prime Ministers had to be wary of. Now when he stands up in Parliament, he is battered away. An irrelevant bit player in an irrelevant bit party, trying to push an argument which becomes more and more out of sync with the public with each passing year. The Brexit fear factor is dead. But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So the UK-EU summit this week seems like the closing of one chapter, the beginning of a new one. The intention to travel in a very different direction towards the EU rather than away, or anti-parallel to it, was made clear a long time ago by Labour, but this week saw the first actual step in that direction. The most positive steps up until this point were the Windsor Framework, which was really just a more cordial way of agreeing to diverge than the line Boris Johnson took, and cooperation in the defence of Ukraine, which Rishi Sunak still managed to make look unnecessarily strained. This week was a definite and positive step forwards. Little regard for hang-ups. Some hang-ups remain, of course, but Labour weren't too bothered about putting them on show this week. The agreements were good for the economy, good for jobs, good for easing the cost of living, and the government weren't afraid to say so. But another chapter seems to have closed as well. Mark Francois, chair of the infamous ERG, or European Research Group, was treated with disdain. The disdain he should always have received at the dispatch box. During the debate on the outcome of the summit, Mark Francois stood up full of self-importance like he always does, and he blathered on about rule taking and the ECJ. And when he'd finally finished, sat down looking pleased with himself, oh, I've got the Prime Minister here. Starmer got up and said, and I quote, "I had forgotten about some of the nonsense that is spouted." The ERG were one of the terrors of the green benches. Now they're a sad little joke, led by a sad little joker. The ERG were created in 1993. That was a big year for the Eurosceptics. It was the same year that John Major, after surviving a confidence vote against a Eurosceptic, John Redwood, reportedly banged his fists on the table and called 3 Eurosceptics in his cabinet a bunch of bastards. It followed the rancour which had taken place regarding Maastricht. At the time, the aggressive Euroscepticism in the party was entirely a source of problems for the Conservatives. No wider spill-off damage done by them. Just a source of infighting within the Conservative Party itself. Well, some years later, when the Conservatives returned to power under a much weaker leader, David Cameron, the ERG was fully formed and aided from the outside by Nigel Farage's UKIP party. They persuaded Cameron that a referendum was the only way to save the Conservative Party. In reality, it set the party on a 10-year journey to ejecting all the brains from their ranks and has now left them potentially looking at a future as, at best, a second-tier party alongside the Lib Dems, and at worst, they could actually become a third-tier party. In fact, so bereft is the Conservative Party now of any serious guiding principles or intelligence that I don't actually think they even have the capacity to save themselves. What's more, they don't even believe it themselves. A lot of Tory MPs want to deal with Reform UK, which is an explicit admission that they don't think they have any cards to play with anymore. The only thing which is likely to save the Conservatives now is Reform UK imploding, which is possible, but it's not certain. And the ERG ruled the backbenchers with an iron rod. Cameron, May, Johnson, they used to shit themselves whenever a prominent member of the ERG stood up to ask a question. Tory leader after Tory leader would attempt to placate them. When they kept voting against Theresa May's Brexit deal, she would blame Jeremy Corbyn. Leader of the opposition, why aren't you voting with the government? Unfortunately, he never used to turn around and say, well, why didn't your own party vote with you then? She never blamed the ERG. They were the ones voting against it, and they were supposed to be on her side. Even Rishi Sunak, who had to push the Windsor Framework past them, took care not to antagonise them more than necessary. Now look where we are. The chair of a now much diminished ERG in a much diminished party, thanks in no small part to that party ever listening to him in the first place, stands up to grandstand, and the response is met with, "I had forgotten about some of the nonsense that is spouted. Sit down, you silly little man." He didn't add that last bit. He'd already sat down. Mark Francois, who always has that look of nervous self-importance about him. Let me tell you who Francois is. He's not the playground bully. He's the one who befriends the playground bully and goes around with them echoing his taunts from just behind them. a sad, pathetic little loser who continues to try to replicate that feeling of self-importance. But the fact is, the ERG is basically defunct now. It can no longer serve any purpose. Francois has tried to transition from using the group to leave the EU, which is now done, to defending Brexit. But what's the point? Within the Conservative Party now, there is nobody left to attack Brexit. There is no point in defending Brexit within the Conservative Party. The party has finally done what it wanted them to do. 10 years ago, it has found a united position on Europe. It did so by sacrificing their very existence. The party now exists wholly in support of not just Brexit, but as we've seen this week, a hard Brexit. And it will not rise again on the current trajectory. See, for those on the right who hate Labour, they have Reform UK now. And because of the skew of ages voting for Leave and Remain in 2016, it is now statistically certain, we know, there are more Remain voters left alive than Leave voters. But our electorate is not stranded in time. It's not just about those who voted Leave and Remain. We've had 9 more years of young people coming of voting age. Young people are overwhelmingly pro-EU. And don't be fooled by being told the number of young people flocking to Reform UK. The overall figures are no greater than used to exist for the right-wing options 10 years ago. Reform UK have just hived votes off the Conservatives. They haven't created new ones. By the end of this Parliament, if it does last until 2029, we will have had 13 years of Leave voters dying off and 15 years of young people coming of age. Why 15 years and not 13? Because Labour are lowering the voting age to 16, which means when that happens, we will get 3 years of young voters for the price of 1 year to bring us in line with Scotland and Wales. We do not yet have an electorate where the key voters are overwhelmingly pro-EU yet, but that is the inevitable direction of travel. No matter how successful Nigel Farage is, he's not going to change that. Brexit relied upon a particular generation, and even then only just crawled over the line. The Conservatives are not going to recover by following the lead of the ERG. To follow Mark Francois further is to walk the path to oblivion. Francois is often referred to as Penfold, for some physical similarities to the much kinder character in Danger Mouse. But Penfold was a hamster. Francois is more like a lemming, leading his colleagues over the edge of a cliff. Demographics are just shifting more and more pro-EU. The Conservatives could choose to break out of their doom loop. They show no sign of wanting to do so, but they have that option. But the ERG has no function, it's finished. More practical members of the group like James Cleverly have moved on. They got what they wanted for it, they no longer need it. It holds no more power, no more sway. It's just a tiny, irrelevant group within a diminishing, irrelevant party, and before long, all that will be left of it is Mark Francois' sweaty arse print on a House of Commons bench. But there we are, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.